Hello there and welcome back. In the previous episode, we created this little dot on the screen. So now the player can walk around, and if he hovers over an object that has a certain script, we're going to get the name of the object. So we can do it with the trees, we can do it with the rabbits. And the other thing we did was create these rabbits and create the basic AI movement script. So now we have these rabbits that jump around, they wait a little bit, then they choose another direction, and they keep jumping around. So I created two packs of rabbits. We have this one here and we have this one here. I simply put about 5 rabbits together and I placed all of them inside an empty object and I called it rabbit family. So then I just duplicated this rabbit family and I placed it in another place. So this way you don't need to go and do it one by one and drag a rabbit over here and over there. You can just create these little packs of animals and put them into one little group and then just duplicate the groups and put them all over the place, because when we start the game they will still just run around and they will not stay in one group. But that's a good way to really put small packs of animals all over the place. And then both of these rabbit families we can put in another empty game object and call it creatures or animals. Okay, so just put both of these in animals, and this way our hierarchy screen is more organized the same way that I did with the trees. And I placed all the tree prefabs because later on we're going to have hundreds of trees all over the place, and inside animals we're going to have all the different creatures. We can also do something like that and just create another group and call it rabbits, and then place these rabbit families inside the rabbits, and the rabbits place them inside animals. So it will be much easier just to find the specific creature that we want, because later on we're going to have many different kind of animals and we want to be organized. So in this episode we're going to see how we can actually pick up items, okay, because right now we can only interact with them, but we also want to pick them up. And we're going to also start creating our inventory system. So it will take a few episodes to actually finish the inventory system, and even after we finish it right now, we're going to expand it more and more later on in the series. But before we start with the inventory system and with picking up objects, I just want to fix a few things. So in the previous episode, we saw that there is this very strange thing. When our creatures just stand and wait, they kind of rotate around themselves. And it's something very weird, and I told you that I'm going to look into it. So the way we're going to fix that is simply by going to our creature prefab, and then we go to the rigid body, okay? And inside the rigid body, we simply need to go to these constraints and freeze the X rotation and the Z rotation, because we don't want to freeze the Y rotation. We want them to rotate on the Y axis, but we don't want them to rotate on the Z axis or the X axis. And when we freeze the rotation, then they will no longer rotate in a weird way, okay? So that fixes this problem. Another problem that we didn't really talk about, but I noticed it when I played a bit in the game, is that if we select an object, it will give us a name. Then we select another object that is not interactable, for example the terrain, then this little title disappears. But what if we select the tree and then we hover to the sky? Then we can see that this title is not disappearing. So that's a bug. I mean, it's not something very important, but It is important because if our player will play the game and see that there is this bug, he will feel like the game is not polished, and that's why we need to fix all of these small things. And the way we simply fix it is by, first of all, understanding why it happens. So if we go into our script and into the selection manager, we can see that we have this part here, the part where we send the array, and we say that if the object that it hits has an interactable object script on it, then set active this text UI, okay? But if the object doesn't have this interactable script, then set it to false. But the problem is that the sky is not even an object. So we're not covering this option, because it's like we're saying, if you're hitting an object and this object has this script, then do this. If this object doesn't have a script, then do this. But the sky is not an object, so the game just says, okay, the sky is not an object. I don't need to turn off the UI because the sky is not an object. You told me that only if the object doesn't have the script, then set it to false. So it's something that is easy to overlook, but we can simply fix it by going here. And here we say that if we hit something, do all of this. And only then we actually check if the hit itself has this script. So all we need to do is to add an else statement over here, because then we say, if you're not hitting anything at all, then also make this UI inactive, okay? Because here we basically say, if there is a hit, but without a script, without an interactable script, okay? But here we say, if there is no hit at all, okay? So you understand what happened? So that's the way we fix this problem, okay? I'm just leaving these things here. And if you want to fix this problem, you can also change and add this one line of code here, okay? And now when we go into our game, we saved and we go into our game. So now if we point on the tree and then point to the sky, well, we can't even do that. It just disappears the second we're not hovering something. Even here, if we hover over the tree and then the sky, it just disappears. Okay? And that fixed our problem. So the next thing we want to do is start working on picking up objects, okay? So we can do that with a simple cube, or we can use a certain prefab. I downloaded a prefab. You can go to this thing here, Rock Collection Semi-Realistic, and download it. It has a few different rocks, but you can again apply it on every different prefab that you want to pick up. I'm just using this one right now. So I created a prefab already, this stone, and I'm going to drag it and place it over here. Okay, so we have this stone in our hierarchy. Let's just save it. Let's play the game, see how it looks. Now when we come here, we can see this rock. We may need to change a little bit the color because it has this light. Right, we don't want it to be like that, but I'm going to fix that later. But we can see that if we hover over it with our pointer, nothing happens because there is no script on this rock. So let's take the script, the interactable object script, and we're going to drag it on our stone. Okay, so now the stone has this interactable object. let's open it. Okay, and we're just going to give it a name, stone, the same way we did with the trees and the bunnies. So it will work the same way. We can approach it and we can actually point on it and it will say stone. Okay? But before we're going to take it and place it in an inventory, we just need to do the basic picking up, okay? Right now there is a problem because if I'm standing very far away from the... Oh, no. If I'm standing far away from the stone and I'm hovering, it will still give me the name. So it means that if I click, I will be able to pick it up. And we don't want this to happen because we can't really pick an object if we're far away. We want to create a certain area around the rock that will be the range to pick it up, right? Maybe if we stand over here, then we can pick it up. If we stand over here, we don't want to be able to pick it up. And we also don't want this little information to appear when we're far away because we don't want to just walk like that and then point on this tree and it will say tree. We don't want to walk and then just to point around and okay, so there's a rabbit. Like we have some superpowers that we can actually see this far away, right? So we don't want this. We want to create a certain area around our object that only in that area we're going to be able to see the information and also pick up the item. Okay, so to do that, we're going inside our interactable object script and we're going to create a public bool called player in range. Okay, we're going to create two methods. So private void on trigger enter and private void on trigger exit. Okay, so now we're simply going to say what happens when we enter into this area or when we exit this area. But then we also need to check if the object that actually goes inside this area is our player. So we're going to go to player and do the same way that I did. We're going to create a tag. So if you don't have this tag already, you can create it, but usually there is a player tag. So just tag the player with this tag. And then inside the script, we're going to say if other compare tag player, and we're going to do the same thing here. So if the object that enters inside this area is tagged as the player, then do something, because we don't want to do it when a rabbit enters, right? We don't want the text to appear suddenly when a rabbit entered that area, right? And it's very possible if the rabbit will walk around and he will enter this area. We don't want it to react to the bunny. We want it to react to the player. So that's why we're checking if the other, right? So the other is the other thing that comes inside and collides with our collider, okay? So if that other, and we compare the tag, and if it's player, then do something, else don't do anything, okay? So if it's the player, player in range equals true, okay? And we're going to do the same thing here, but this time it will be false, okay? So if we enter into this area, the boolean player in range will be true. If we exit, it will become false. So this way we can keep track if the player is in range of this item, okay? So this boolean is here inside this script. So each item, each interactable object will keep track if we're inside its area. It's a picking area, okay? So now that we have this, we can save it. And before we can test it, we actually need to create this area. So to do that, we go to Stone and we are creating another box collider. But the difference between these two is that this box collider is the box collider that simply creates a collision, okay? So if we do it on a tree and we walk, we won't be able to pass through the tree, right? So it's only to make it a solid thing, so we won't be able to pass through it, right? But this box collider will be its trigger. So this box collider will act as an area and it will search for something to enter inside of it. So then we click here, Edit Collider, and we're going to play with these size. We're going to make it bigger. Maybe let's do 20, 20. And the Y doesn't need to be 20 because we're not flying still. So let's see if this is enough, okay? You can see this area. So now when we play, if we actually go inside this area, then this little box here, player in range, should have a V, right? If we actually enter this area. And right now we don't see it, but if we go closer, we can see it. But that's too close, right? We don't want to have to actually go this close to an item to pick it. We want to be somewhere, maybe somewhere here, right? So let's go into our scene. And we can see that our player stands here. So let's just expand the trigger zone. Let's click on the stone and again, edit. And let's just make it bigger, something like that, okay? And on the Z, so it's 45. Let's make it round, 45. And that's enough. Of course, we need to exit play mode, so it will save it. And now let's play. And if we go, we can see that it's true right now. And that's good, okay? If we're here, we don't want it to tick, but if we're here, maybe, again, you can play with that. I think I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, but again, you can change it to what fits. Let's do 60 on 60, okay? So now, so we can go inside our script, inside the selection manager, and just add another condition to actually display this text. Because before we want to be able to pick something up, we want to first see the name, right? So here we just add and we copy all of this thing. So if this item has this script, and if this item and we go inside the script itself, player in range. So if player in range is true and it actually has this component, right, then we're going to be able to see it. So let's check it again. So now, even if we hover over the stone, we're not going to be able to see the name of the item. We need to be inside this area to see the name. But now there's another problem, because if we go here and we stand inside this area, it doesn't matter where we point, it will say stone. If we want it to disappear, we have to actually hover outside of this area. Why? Because here, the component is actually considering this entire area as the object, because it sees, okay, I have a collider on it. So even if it's a trigger, it still considers this area as the rock, as the stone. So to fix that, we simply need to do something so that our raycast will ignore this isTrigger box collider. It will only register when we hit this box collider, which is not trigger. And the way to do it is simply by going to Edit, Project Settings, and here in Physics, we can go to Queries Hit Triggers, and it will be with this little V. We simply need to remove it, okay? So when we do that, and we go back into our game, it will ignore this trigger area, and it will no longer count it as the object. Okay, so you can see I'm inside the area, but only when I actually point on this box collider, on the small box collider, it will register as the stone. Okay, but not here. So we can use this little thing here that we did to actually make the raycast ignore all the isTrigger box colliders and only focus on the ones that are not trigger. So we need to have 2 box colliders for every item, for every object, and we're going to do the same thing with the trees, and we're going to do the same thing with the rabbits, but it depends if we want to do the same thing, because for now we're focusing on picking up items, and we don't want to pick up trees, we don't want to pick up rabbits. We want to pick up some items, so when we will actually see how we are going to chop down trees or interact with rabbits, we're going to focus on that. Right now we're focusing on picking up objects. So we can come here, we can see this object, we need to get closer, and then we can point on it, and it means that we can also pick it up. So the thing that we have left is to actually click on the mouse, and then this item will be picked up. So to do that, we simply go into our interactable object, and we're going to create an update method because we still didn't have one here. Void update. So the reason we are putting it inside the update is because we want to check if the player is actually clicking on the mouse. So I'm going to set it as the left mouse button, but you can set it whatever you want. You can also set it as a key, for example, E or something like that. So we're going to type in if input get key down, key code, mouse 0, and we can see it tells us the left or primary mouse button. So that's what we want, mouse 0. But it's not enough that we click, right? We also want to make sure that we are inside this area, because we don't want to be able to pick something if we're outside, right? We want to stand inside this area. So then we simply say and player in range, okay? So if this is true and this is true, then we're going to be able to pick the item. So right now we're not going to actually pick it up and place it somewhere because we don't have an inventory, but we're going to test that. So we're going to type in debug log, and we're going to say item added to inventory. Okay, so we're going to see that it actually works. And for the effect, we can also destroy this game object. Okay, so we're destroying the game object that this script is on. So in our case, it will be the stone. Okay, so now it will look for a mouse key for the left mouse key, and it will also look if we're inside the area, and only if both of these conditions are true, then it will take and destroy the object. Okay, So let's see if it works. So if we're standing here and we're clicking, nothing happens. I'm clicking on the left mouse button, nothing happens. But when I'm inside this area and I see the name, then I click, and we can see here at the bottom left corner, item added to inventory, and it also disappears and it is destroyed from our scene. Okay, so it works and we picked up this rock. There will be a small problem, and the problem is that if we run our game, and even though the Raycast is not considering this box collider as the object itself, if we're standing inside this area but we click anywhere on the other box collider which is triggered, it will still pick up the stone. Okay? So to fix this problem, which is even more problematic than the thing with the sky, so we really want to take care of that, and the way we're going to fix that is by going into our selection manager and create another bool and make it public and call it on target, something like that. Maybe I'm going to change that later on. So with this bool, we're going to keep track if our cursor, if our point is actually on the box collider, the one that is in the middle, and not this entire area. So it will become true when this is true, right? Because now the Raycast will ignore this area. So simply we do this is true. Else it's false, else it's false. And we're also going to make it false by default. Okay? So now we can actually use this bool to check if we're on target. And to do that, we simply go back into the interactable object, and we're going to try to use this boolean. But to do that, we need to actually access Selection Manager. But right now, we can't do that. So if we say and Selection Manager and we press this, we can't find on target. No, there is nothing here. We can also use the instance. No, there is no way to enter it, and it's public. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to transform Selection Manager into a singleton. So if you don't know what a singleton is, it's just a design pattern that is used to work more efficiently. Some people don't like it, other people like it. As long as you use it and you know how to keep your game working without it causing problems, it's a good tool. So the way to do that, we're going to type in public static selection manager instance get set. Okay, but we also need to make it actually into a singleton so that we won't be able to create more instances of this selection manager, right? So we're going to create an awake method. And we're going to type in if instance is not equals null and instance is not equals this, then destroy this game object. Okay? Else instance is this. And we can also hide it here because we don't need to touch that too much. So let's save. And now this selection manager became a singleton. Okay, save that. And we can go here. And now we can actually access all of its fields here. We can access this Boolean. So we can go here, instance on target. And we want to see if it's on target, right? So we want to see if it's true. And if it's on target, it means it's true. So now only if it will be on target, we're going to be able to pick up the item. So let's save. Let's go back to the game. And now, if we click here, it will not pick up the stone, okay? Only if we are actually on target, it will pick up the stone. And that's how we are fixing this problem. And now we also created our first singleton, so we can use all of these things in other places as long as we actually make sure that we're not creating all kinds of connections that will break later on, okay? Another thing we can do to make it look a little bit better is just to get rid of all of this code because it's too long, right? Maybe it's not that long for you, but we can make it shorter. So the way we're going to do that is simply create a variable of this selection transform and the script itself. So we can do something like that. Interactable object our interactable, right? And say that our interactable is selection transform and take all of this and place it inside. And then we can just use this thing here and replace it here and replace it here. Okay? Or we can just do it like that, call it interactable. So now, again, it doesn't really save up that much space, but maybe later on we're going to use it more and more, then we don't need this long line here when we can actually store all of this inside a variable and then use it as many times as we want. Okay? So that's that. So for now, we are moving towards actually being able to pick up items and put them inside the inventory. And right now we can actually go and pick up items. And because it's a prefab, this stone is a prefab, let's just apply it to the actual prefab. We can take this interactable object script and place it on other items that we want to pick up. Right now, it will also be applied to these trees and rabbits because we have an interactable script on them, but they don't have a second box collider, right? So we won't be able to pick them up, and we don't want to pick them up. So later we also need to cancel this option. We need to check somehow if this interactable object is actually something we also want to pick up or not. So in this case, with the stone, we want to pick it up, but in case of the tree, we don't want to pick it up. So we want to use the same script, but we need to make this difference between these things that we do want to pick up and we don't want to pick up. Otherwise, we will be able to pick them up, right? Because here, we didn't say, and if the item is a stone or if it's not a tree. So if we did have another box collider, we could actually pick up this tree, and we don't want to do that. After we chop it down and becomes logs or something, we do want to pick up the logs, but we don't want to pick up the tree. Okay? So that's all for this episode. In the next episode, we're going to finally start with the inventory itself. We're going to create the UI, okay? So I'm going to download a free asset pack from Unity that will be our UI, but you can use your own, whatever you like. And we're going to start building the scripts to actually move things inside the inventory. We will be able to drag and drop items inside the inventory. We're going to be able to eventually have also a player equipped panel that we are going to be able to equip things. So we are going to be able to drag, for example, an axe over there, and then it will stay in this slot. We're going to be able to put clothes, and we're also going to be able to delete things from the inventory. So to do all of that, we need a few different scripts. And we also, of course, want to pick up the stone and make it appear inside the inventory. So we're going to continue with the inventory. As I told you, it will take a few episodes to actually finish it, but we started today. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not subscribed. It will help me a lot. I really want to get to 1,000 subscribers. Maybe you're watching this in the future and I have more than 1,000, then I'm very happy. Me in the future is very happy, but right now I'm still not there. So it will really help me if you subscribe, and see you next time.